Hi, this is Doug Whedon at thewalledgarden.net. Well, let's take a look a little bit more about the bad news. You know, last time we considered the idea that we are dominated and we are enslaved by our old nature. We have been forced to follow a certain train of thought of self-absorption and self-fulfillment. And so when we look at that, you know, it's a natural question to say, what does that look like in everyday life? You know, well, it's made up of three things, because we were created with these needs inside us that only God could fulfill. And when we went into exile, when we were cut off from God, we became emaciated. We became starved. You can't get enough, you see, of what's around us, because He was this infinite source, and so we had infinite needs in us, and now all we're left with is this these finite resources around us, and we just can't get enough, and so we're in this place of starvation, and so that in itself has manifested in us the idea of lust. Meaning we're just headlong wanting and wanting and wanting. And it breaks down into three areas. Number one is the lust, the scriptures calls it the lust of the flesh. And what that means is that we want to feel good all the time. We want to have a rush. We want to have a high. We want to feel like life is worth living, and that it's something worth getting up in the morning and doing, and we want to feel good about that all the time. It's sensory, it's sensual, and not necessarily sexual, though sexual is part of that picture, but sensual is a much more general idea, that we want sensory stimulus that will make us feel good at any given moment, and preferably at every given moment. And so that's the lust of the flesh. The second thing is the lust of the eyes, which means if I see it, I want it. You know, if I didn't see it, I wouldn't be aware of it. But as soon as I see it, I want it. And the scripture calls that being covetous, or being greedy, or whatever the case. There's a lot of different aspects to this idea. But the lust of the eyes is that we are scanning about us, we're casting about us all the time and seeing things that we want. And it's an automatic thing within us, that we are empty, and so we see something and we say, that will probably fulfill me. You know, public relations companies have taken advantage of this dynamic for centuries and centuries. You know, lately in the 20th century and on, you know, we've been looking at the idea of commercials and stuff like that. They take advantage of this. If you can just put it out in front of people, they're going to want it. That's just the way it is. And so the lust of the eyes. The third thing is the pride of life, and this has to do with it's not just a lust for stuff. You know, the first one was a lust for sensory things. The second one's a lust for wanting something you can see. This is a lust for being important. You know, it's the idea that I need to be more important than everyone else, because it's just competitive and I need to rise to the top. I need to be the one who has the best perspective, has the best of this, best of that. And in only that way can I feel good about myself. And so we got the lust of the flesh, we got the lust of the eyes, and we got the pride of life. Those are the three things that our old nature manifests itself in our lives. And so this is what dominates us. This is what, people spend 80 years pursuing the fulfillment of these three things and find themselves never being able to scratch the surface, but being just lustful at their pursuit. Since these three things are always pushing our buttons, we are forced, you see, to obey. We're forced to obey their promptings. In it's exhausting. It goes on every day, and it's a lifestyle issue. And in the process of developing this lifestyle, we create what is called personal propaganda, where we have to live with ourselves in pursuing the fulfillment of these three things in kind of just a headlong fashion. And we can recognize that it's not quite what we were, designed for, but we're forced to do it. And so we create this propaganda within ourselves. The scripture calls it the lie, which means that we believe that we have the right to act this way since it was there in the first place. We have to, kind of justify our behavior to ourselves. And so, we develop this idea that we have a right to all of the resources around me. I have the right to survive. I have the right to put myself first in the picture. And so you build this kind of propaganda, this personal propaganda, this illusion to yourself, so that you feel, so you can sleep at night, that sort of thing. Well, it even goes so far as to say, well, God created me like this, and so therefore he must even validate what I'm doing. Well, the problem is he didn't create us like this. We chose this direction. We chose to take this tack in life, and it has led us down a path of dysfunction that we have to live with the consequences, you see, in that picture. So ultimately, this whole idea, of whether we've built this personal propaganda, this justification, whether we are in pursuit of the lust of the eyes, lust of the flesh, and the pride of life, all these things are going on and on. It makes us self-serving, and ultimately what it does, it creates us into a god of our own image. It creates us into the god of our imagination, you see, because we are the standard of which everyone needs to measure themselves. We are the ones that need to survive, even if everyone else doesn't, if we compete for it and I get it, even if they don't get it, I deserved it. You see, this is the ultimate sense of idolatry. This is the ultimate sense of man becoming God, you see. And that's why humanism and things like this follow this train of thought, because it's instinctual for us. So if we back up, look at the bad news, we see that we were impregnated by our old nature. Number two, we are estranged from God. And it manifests itself in the lust of the eyes, the lust of the flesh, and the pride of life, which sets us up as the center, the standard for life. We become a god on our own. And this whole idea blinds us, you see, to the reality that God created in the process. And the longer we believe this, the longer we live this way, the stronger it gets inside of us. And that's bad news all by itself. But the real issue is the stronger that it gets, the deeper our spiral. We keep spiraling down and down and down into a deeper and deeper dysfunction. This is truly part of the bad news. Well, I encourage you to step out of the world system, come up for air, and take a breath.